Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
There is a new facial recognition app that puts privacy in peril, according to a New York Times article that recently came out. Right now, it's mostly focused toward law enforcement, but it has the potential to become publicly available. It's a database of 3 billion images that facilitates identification from a mere snapshot. Pull out your smartphone, take a little quick snap, and all of a sudden, you've got access to this massive database. It is truly unlike anything that's been available before. Hopefully, it's pretty clear why you care about this, but with 3 billion images and the ability to scrub the internet for these images, even people like your friendly redneck liberal may not have to consent at all for their images to be part of this. And it's a question not just of whether or not your photos are on the internet, but it speaks to privacy as a whole. And if you read this article online at thestateofus.org, you'll see it has a very different title, one that suggests that this could be the end of privacy as we know it. But of course, we couldn't begin a conversation on privacy, big tech, and facial recognition without
TrueChat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Tell you what, this one's got me like throwing my hands up saying, well, here we go. It's finally happened.
Yeah.
It's like you don't even have to have taken the picture for them to be able to recognize you. You could be standing at the ballpark and somebody else takes a picture and you're in the background, and all of a sudden they know where you are, where you live, and whether or not you're at home. This is amazing, and it's awful scary. But anyway, let's go.
So Clearview AI devised a groundbreaking facial recognition app, according to the New York Times article. You take a picture of a person, upload it, and get to see public photos of that person, along with links to where the photos appeared. The system, whose backbone is a database of more than 3 billion images that Clearview claims to have scraped from Facebook, YouTube, Venmo, and millions of other websites, goes far beyond anything ever constructed by the United States government or Silicon Valley giants. Federal and state law enforcement officers said that while they had only limited knowledge of how Clearview works and who is behind it, they had used its app to help solve shoplifting, identity theft, credit card fraud, murder, child and sexual exploitation cases. Quote, "The weaponization possibilities of this are endless," said Eric Goldman, co-author of the High-Tech Law Institute at Santa Clara University. So, basically, Lance, right, you're trying to find somebody, you're a law enforcement agent.
Right.
Or private security. This isn't mentioned until you get into the article a little further. But they've licensed this to not only law enforcement, right, but to some private security forces as well. So you may not have to be a law enforcement official, but you're one of these people that's looking for somebody, and in some sort of allegedly official capacity. And all you've got, right, is a grainy sideways image from a security camera. Now, typically, if you were to use typical facial recognition programs that the police have access to, you probably wouldn't get much back for a number of reasons. One has to do with the original image itself, because it's not a good image. It's not at the right angle. It's not square and at head level. So you're getting into the problems of the computer not being able to use the image that you have. Second problem, let's say it's a perfect photo and it's, at face level, it's nice and clear. We got the perfect photo. If Lance has never been arrested, and if Lance doesn't have a driver's license or state ID of some kind, then they're not going to find him anyway, right? Because that is the way the system works, is it's primarily access to this. But this goes to a whole new level, because rather than rely on the database of government available photos, it's going to search the internet. Mm-hmm. It's going to search Facebook. It's going to search the Urbana Daily Citizen, where Lance has appeared in photos in the paper before. It's going to search everywhere it can, right?
Well, it just goes in, a year ago, this February, the Indiana State Police started experimenting with it, and they solved a case within 20 minutes. There had been a fight in a park, and it ended when one man it was a fight between two men, and one of them got shot in the stomach. And a bystander recorded the crime on their phone. So the police had a photo of the gunman's face to run through the app. They immediately got a match, it says, and an arrest was made. And quote from the police, the Indiana State Police, he did not have a driver's license and hadn't been arrested as an adult, so he wasn't in the government databases. So the man was arrested and charged. And they said, we would not have been able to identify him without the ability to search social media for his face. Okay, so see, everything's fine. The police are going to use it and catch all the bad guys, and the rest of us don't have to worry because nobody would ever use it for evil.
Well, we're going to get into the pros and cons and also talk about our solutions in today's show.
But that's how it's used. An example of where, like you were talking about, there's no government database. The person had never been in trouble before, didn't have a driver's license, and yet the Indiana State Police could not only find a match and find out his name, but knew where he lived because of the picture that they found on social media. They didn't say where on social media, but, and in 20 minutes it was solved, and there are cases of police in Florida using this to solve all kinds of crimes. So, it's just, but like you said, it's not your typical go through the mug books and, get this, because we've talked about that before and how you can make kind of how the police in other cities and states had played with pictures.
Right.
To try to
the altering of mug shots,
convict people. These are just, somebody takes a picture and you're in it. They now have access to that picture using this application.
So I think part of what's important too to note is that facial recognition technology, right, on its face, and this gets into a little bit of the history, has been around for like 20 years. So this isn't a really new thing. Police departments have had access to this type of technology for a while. The thing about this that's new, and that's the key here, is that before it was limited to a finite database. And there's two things about this, Lance, that are, I think, fundamentally different from programs of the past or even programs that are in use today. Number one is that it has access to so many more images because it's what's called scraping the internet for them. So it's going to places where there's lots of pictures of people, specifically Facebook, YouTube. YouTube, you're going to see people in lots of videos, right? And it's, in the case of videos, it's creating still images of the video and then pulling out references to those. And then what it does, Lance, in order to facilitate a fast search process, and this is another thing because historically, especially when this stuff came out, it would take forever. You'd scan a database of only maybe 100,000 photos, and it could take a long time to even see if there was any matches, and you may get back and say there's nothing, So the other thing about this is the speed. You mentioned they solved a case in 20 minutes, The reason it's so fast is it actually goes through as it scrapes these images and it groups people together based on facial structure. So it uses mathematical principles when you upload a photo, Lance, to learn about the angles of your face and shape, and then it immediately eliminates 90% of all possible photos in the database, not based on, how closely does this image match another, but do the mathematical computations of this image, what group do they go with? And
we're going to talk about that, or I'm going to bring it up later, but to your point of this has been around, basically it says technology in the article, it says technology that readily identifies everyone based on his or her face has been taboo because of its radical erosion of privacy. In 2011, Google's chairman at the time said it was the one technology the company had held back because it could be used, quote, in a very bad way. So this has been around, but everybody else all of the powers that be had backed off. And even it says in San Francisco, the city barred the police from using facial recognition technology. So it's not new technology. The companies have had it, but now it's being released. But even the tech people said, we're not sure that this is ethical. But all it's taken is one person to throw it out there and say, okay, now as a society, what are you going to do with it? Here it is. What are you going to do with it?
Right. Well, and I think, and this gets into what we're going to talk about next, which is the controversy and the pros and cons of this. Because at the moment, Clearview AI, which recently changed its name to Clearview AI, right, is basically this independent startup. It doesn't have, billions of dollars in funding or anything like that. It does have some interesting names behind it, but it's so far only for police and private security, right? But the key there, so far.
Right.
And the article in the New York Times gets into, they ask some questions to the founder about, what's the future potential of this? Where do you see it going? And those are the questions that I think are critical when you're talking about the pros and cons. Because we can talk about the technology by itself, but you also have to talk about the people and how they're going to use the technology, right, Lance? Because, that's a huge part of it. It's like any number of other things we've talked about. The technology itself isn't evil. How it's used, that's what we have to be concerned about. How can it be deployed? Who has access to it? And what are they going to use it for? That's what's to come. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
It's a database of 3 billion images that facilitates identification from a mere snapshot. A facial recognition app that puts privacy in peril, according to the New York Times article. We've talked so far a little bit about the history of facial recognition and why there's a controversy. Now Lance and I are going to take an opportunity to get into the pros and cons of this. I think for the most part, Lance, right, some of the pros are pretty obvious. You already mentioned them. A police department started using this and it solved the case within 20 minutes. That inherently seems like a pretty good thing, that they couldn't solve otherwise, right? That's an important note. It's not, well, they solved it in 20 minutes instead of 40 minutes. It's, they solved it in 20 minutes and it was a case that basically was cold, until they used this.
Exactly.
And that goes to another point too, because the article, it's a big one. And so if you're in the mood to check it out and you want all the data, definitely recommend that you go to thestateofus.org and check it out because it's a lot. And I think that for something like this, that's probably good because it covers a lot of ground. Police Sergeant Farrar said, with Clearview, you can use photos that aren't perfect. A person can be wearing a hat or glasses, or it can be a profile shot or a partial view of their face. He uploaded his own photo to the system, and it brought up his Venmo page. He ran photos from old dead-end cases and identified more than 30 suspects. In September, the Gainesville Police Department paid $10,000 for an annual Clearview license, despite the fact that the company does have the possibility of producing false positives. It has a pretty high success rate. Its tool finds matches up to 75% of the time, but it's unclear how often the tool delivers false matches. So in other words, you put the photo in, right, and it says 3 out of 4 times we're going to give you a match. Whether or not it's the right match, well, we don't necessarily disclose data on that. And that's where you're bringing the human element back into it.
Well, and it says too that this hasn't been tested. There's been no independent testing to this on the accuracy claims.
Right.
So, there's the other thing is like, well, no, this is really accurate, but it's all coming from the company. And then it's all just anecdotal evidence from police departments. There's been nobody who's looked at this and said, okay, this really does work that well, or, well, if we turn this loose, even for good, to stop evil, it's going to cause all kinds of problems. And here's the point that just gets me. The owner of the company, the gentleman who's released this technology, when other people, he was asked about all the problems that could occur, and he goes, a lot of people are doing it. He shrugged. Facebook knows. I mean, it's just this flippant attitude. And there's another part at the end of the article where they ask him about, well, what if people use this for evil? And he goes, hadn't really thought about that. I mean, just the attitude that, but it's just like, I was talking to my daughter about it last night, and it's, the whole Pandora's box thing. Once you open the box, you can't stuff it back in. I mean, I'm thinking of, we learned how to split the atom, and now we can destroy the world with bombs. I mean, I'm not trying to be melodramatic to put this in that same effect, but are we? I mean, those of us who don't usually think in terms of harming other people, but there are people in our society who do. So they're hearing this and they get a hold of this. What are what are the limits to things that people could do with this?
Well, and that's the other side. You mentioned a couple things. One was the Facebook component. The article notes that one reason that Clearview, the company, is catching on is that the service is unique. And that's because it actually violates Facebook's terms of service by scraping profile photos. So Facebook, even though so for people that don't know, your Facebook profile photo, okay, which is the image that's associated with your profile. Not everything in your pictures, because that gets into a whole different realm, but your profile photo is publicly available, okay? That's part of how it works.
Right.
Anybody can see it, whether they have a Facebook account or not, they can see your profile photo. Now, you don't have to upload one, and you can remove your photo, but if you have a photo, there's no option to change that filtering. Everybody sees your profile photo. And Facebook's argument for that is that's if somebody's not your friend and they're trying to find you, that's going to help them find you if they can see your photo.
Right.
But Facebook also, in its terms of service, in other words, if you're using the site, you are by default agreeing to the terms of service. That's part of how most websites work.
Right.
It prohibits somebody from going through and downloading for database use those photos. You're not allowed to do it. It's part of their terms of service. You may not do that. That said, Facebook's looking the other way,
Right.
So
how do you stop it?
Right.
You can't do this.
Right.
This is, you can't do this with our website. Oh, somebody's doing it. Now what do we do?
Right. It's mostly an honor-based system because it goes back to you don't have to have a Facebook account in order to see those pictures. So so
since I have access to those pictures, what's stopping me from downloading them?
Right. And there are things
other than, like you said, the honor system.
Yeah.
If I see that somebody drops a $20 bill at the gas pump, I'm honor bound to walk over and pick it up and hand it to them and say, hey, this dropped out of your pocket. Oh, I thank you very much.
Right. But if
I don't, I didn't break a law. I mean, I broke a moral code, maybe an ethics code. And some people say, yeah, well, I don't have the same morals as you do, or I don't have the same ethics, the same code of ethics that you do. So in my mind, that's not a crime.
Well, and part of, I would point out, because we have in this article, Clearview has admitted to doing this, right? So I think it's important to know.
Right. That's my quote where the owner says, Facebook knows.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing this. It's okay. Everybody else is doing it, so I can't too. My children weren't allowed to use that excuse.
Not to absolve
everybody
Facebook.
Else jumping off the bridge. You going to jump off a bridge too?
Right.
Just because other people are doing it doesn't make it correct. That's not a defense.
But to also be a little critical of Facebook, they have legal course here. You have an admission, right, that a company is doing this. And my guess is Facebook has evidence because they could probably, look at when mass amounts of their images were downloaded and what IP addresses and servers downloaded those. And they could probably make a pretty, Facebook's got a big team of lawyers. Let's just be fair.
Because
would
we be talking of billions of photographs off of Facebook?
Sure.
Or hundreds of millions of photographs.
Billions.
So
hundreds of millions for sure, but they have like 2 billion users now.
So it would be easy to find somebody who was downloading that number of pictures.
Right. I mean, it would stand out. It's not Lance sitting there at home, right clicking and doing download a billion times. It's a mass exodus of these photos.
So that would appear on their database somewhere and they'd be able to find that, you think?
I mean,
you're the technology
I
guru
think
here.
that with the advanced company that Facebook is, he says they know it's happening, right?
Right.
So how do they know? I mean, I don't know how they know. I'm theorizing here. But if they know it's happening, then they could try, even if they weren't going to win the legal action, at least to show that they were serious about trying to enforce their terms, they could be taking legal action, and they're not. So I guess my point there is they've got terms, but apparently they don't take them all that seriously because they're really not doing anything to enforce the terms. And they do have some options. I mean, granted, they can't necessarily just stop somebody because they don't really have a way to do that, which we talked about. But I also don't want to absolve them of, they could go through the legal system. They could try those levers and they're not trying them. Probably because they look at it and say, people aren't raising too much concern about this at the moment. So.
Well, people don't know that it exists.
No.
I mean, that's the whole point, as this is just, we've done some privacy stuff in the last few months, and there are so many things out there that are happening that we as just the average citizen don't even know it's going on unless you're reading about it, unless your interest lies within somewhere to find out what's going on.
Unless you listen to the State of Us.
We don't know right. People don't know what's going on. We're bringing them we're breaking news here.
But that I think is a big part of it, because we've seen with things like this, right? I mean, take Cambridge Analytica. Public pressure has an amazing ability to make things happen if it becomes clear, concise, and directed. And of course, that's where the challenge lies, because in order for that to occur, people have to have some kind of general consensus. And to have a general consensus, they have to have some kind of general understanding. It's important we take a second, right, and remind people, why are we taking time to explain a nuanced issue to people? Why are we going through this?
This is the big story I'm breaking. This is why we do this, is because we want to educate people here. Those of us here at True Chat, we want to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations.
Hopefully we're getting that done. You'll let us know. thestateofus.org. It's a facial recognition app that has billions of images and is putting privacy in peril. Lance has some big news. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
A database of 3 billion images is facilitating identification from a mere snapshot. Lance and I have talked about the history, the controversy, some of the pros and cons of this, because there are, despite, I'm sure, what sounds like to some of our listeners, a little alarmist. And I think there's good cause to be a little worried, or more than a little worried. Lance is going to make you even more worried here in a second. But there are some upsides to it. It is helping some police departments solve cases that have gone unsolved. And to not minimize the impact of that, I think it's important to think about, I'm sure the families, Lance, of victims of different crimes who have been solved as a result of this, right?
Correct.
It's hard to put that into perspective or weigh that in a tangible way for people in what we are often doing, which is a very abstract look at things. And I guess I just want to take a minute to put that out there before you and I get into what I think what we're going to say, because I don't want,
if someone in your family had been harmed and it's been 10 years, it's a cold case, and the police have no leads to find them. And because of this, they find the person who harmed your family member, who's, maybe still alive, but has been scarred or dealt with emotional issues because of the attack or whatever happened to them. Sure, there's some sense of justice, and wow, finally we caught them and justice will be served, and there'll be some closure and all those types of things. So you're right. There is some obvious good that could come from this.
Right. Or a missing person.
Right.
Because we haven't gotten into, and that's part of what we're going to talk about. So I guess I won't say any more. The missing person thing's kind of self-explanatory, but if you're searching this massive database, you have the potential to pick up somebody in the background of a video that didn't even know they were being filmed, which might help you find a missing person. Or, Lance, what else could it do? Because I think this is where you're going with.
Someone walking down the street would be immediately identifiable, and his or her home address would only be a few clicks away. It would herald the end of public anonymity. And the owner of Clearview AI says, well, there's always going to be a community of bad people who will misuse it.
Which is true.
Which is true. But I mean, I'm thinking, and like I said earlier, I mean, are you kidding me? You're walking down the street and you're not even taking pictures, but somebody takes a picture of you and at the same time then sends it to a companion who types your name in, and they find out who you are and where you live, and they know that the picture was taken in another state, and they know that you and everybody in your home is no longer in your home. Little message, and now your house is robbed. I mean, that's just simple. I mean,
right.
And I'm not even a devious thinker. You know, I'm not one who wants to harm other people or steal or walk that side of the street. I never have, and I never will be.
But you can come up with that in 30 seconds.
I can come up with that. So now take someone who that's how they are earning their living. I hate to say it that way, but you know, that's the way their mind works, or they've trained their mind to think. I'm sure they're coming up with all kinds of things. But, you know, in a snap of my fingers, I came up with how I could use that to rip people off.
I think there's a part there that you mentioned that I'm not sure that we put enough attention or brought enough attention to it in the first segment, and that's the location component. Because these databases have the ability, if you wanted them to update, maybe not in like real time as in instant, but, you know, every day or so. If you're updating those databases that frequently, what Lance was getting to there, because people might be struggling to figure out, Lance, how would they know that you're not at home?
Right.
Well, let's just take Lance, right, as an example. Lance does not have active social media profiles, right?
Correct.
He himself has not consciously or willingly put his picture out there onto the internet. Now,
it's there, but I haven't.
Right. It's there. For lots of different reasons, right? There's newspaper articles.
But is it really something that
student pictures
that I can't do anyway? Because, you know, my family members take pictures and,
right.
You know, and they post them on
and that's
their
what
sites.
I'm getting at.
And
so now,
why am I trying to stop it? Because I'm there.
Lance is at spring training,
right,
in Arizona.
Right.
Okay. And he's with his wife, and she takes a picture that she puts on social media. And Lance isn't even looking at the camera. It's mainly a her, right?
Right.
And she takes it kind of sideways, and Lance's head's sticking out from the side, and he's looking forward. But now somebody wants to know where Lance is, right? They search Lance's image, and they found out that 2 days ago he was at spring training in Arizona. And that's how they then know Lance isn't at home in Ohio. And of course, I have all these other pictures that bring up all these Urbana Daily Citizen articles, right?
Right.
And now I can do something like search the voter database.
Right.
And all of a sudden, in a matter of, 5 minutes, I've learned Lance isn't at home. I have his home address because I know that he resides in Champaign County, Ohio.
Exactly.
And I mean, and again, that's coming from Lance and I, who are not the type of people, I don't think, that would ever try to do something like that. But it doesn't take a genius to figure it out, I guess is the point. If him and I can come up sitting with it here, you know that there are other people that can too. Granted, this isn't in the public sphere yet. Lance's point is, and I think the point of the article too, this isn't a revolutionary thing. The companies that have been able to develop it in the past have stayed away from it, not because the law tells them not to, but because they have recognized that they don't want to get caught up in this.
As I said earlier, ethically and morally, they just don't think this is something that needs to be released to the public.
Right. Because there's a lot of questions about it that haven't been answered. Inherently, we did an episode a couple months ago now, Lance, right, on a book called None of Your Damn Business.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of it this whole episode.
Yeah. And I think it's great. It's still linked at thestateofus.org. So if you all want to go back and listen to the episode we did with the author or pick up a copy of the book, it's a history book. But part of why it's really, I think, very relevant to the conversation that you and I are having right now is it goes over that history of how photography came into play and the privacy questions it raised at the time. Because, I mean, you think about it, there was a world with no photos, and now all of a sudden you can snap photos of people.
Now
right?
Right.
I mean, that raises some big, really big, questions about, well, if I don't want somebody to take my photo, do they have the right to take my photo?
Well, that's like the New York police chief that back at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century created the first mug books. He was heralded as the greatest crime fighter ever because now he took pictures of everybody that he arrested. And so if somebody was, a victim of a crime, they could go through and see if they could pick out if it happened to be a person who had already committed a crime, and they could find out who had done the new crime. And it was like, wow, this is going to be so much easier to catch people. And I think that's where you're going. All we've done is advanced on that, right? Now we have instant photographs, instant access to photographs.
It's only sped up. So the question, Lance, is what do we do about this? Because I think it's safe to say you and I are both of the opinion that doing nothing shouldn't be an option. Even if there's no hope, or even if it seems like there's no hope, it's better to try than to not try, because not trying sends the signal that society's given up and we're just okay with this.
And the earlier you get on it, the better, the more effective you can be in stopping bad things from going on.
So do you have a strong feeling about what should be done, or do you want me to tell you mine and see if you're on the same page?
Yeah, we ought to blow this whole thing up and just,
if only that were,
we could,
if only it were that simple.
We could get Mr. Spock from Star Trek to just mind melt everybody and take the memory away from them so that we knew that we never had this. So that's where I would go. So I'm not.
So you want to destroy the technology and then wipe the minds of everybody that's ever heard of this.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. Maybe we get that little thing that was on.
No problem.
That Will Smith used to carry around, with aliens.
Yeah.
Like if you had saw
the flashy thing.
Yeah. If you'd seen an
from
alien.
Men in Black. Flash them.
There you go. Just flash them and the whole memory of this existing.
No problem.
So, I mean, if we have that technology, let's get it out and use it to get rid of this technology.
Well, failing that,
what do you have?
failing the flashy thing from those things have a name. What are those called? The flashy thing. Somebody let us know.
Okay.
The flashy things from Men in Black. I'm sure, hopefully people know what we're talking about. I would think so. But I think, Lance.
If not, Google it. You'll find pictures of them, and then you'll know where they are right now.
Right.
If you get this from Clearview AI.
So there's a professor, a couple professors quoted in this article, and I think, Lance, it's fair to say that their position is mostly you just outlaw it. You just outlaw facial recognition.
Correct.
To me, I don't think that's the answer. And the reason is because, I'm sure that would help us make some headway on this particular facial recognition issue. But I think it's the wrong mindset approach to technologies like this, because what it says is, as things come along that we have problems with, we'll just we'll just make them illegal. Right. And that'll be the answer. And I don't think that is realistically, that's not an ongoing good way to approach this, because I think we have to answer first. Again, that's always, trying to pull back and get to.
Do you think it's too narrow of a take?
Yes, I think it's too narrow. That's exactly how I would describe it. I think the fact that we don't have comprehensive privacy laws on the books is where you start. You have to answer, what are we entitled to in the 21st century? Because we haven't. Most of what we rely on is, court cases and laws from 30, 40, 50, 100 plus years ago. And that just seems insane when we're in an age where we've created technology that's never existed before. So I think that's step number one.
Right.
Is
You've always got a plan. So you guys got a 3-step plan.
A 3-step plan.
Okay.
And then the next one, I think this is only a 2-parter.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
All right. You don't have a third one?
I'll have to come up with a third one here real quick.
But part two.
Part two is, we take things like, the food that we eat, we've gotten real serious about that, right? Pre-1900s, we weren't very serious about that. It's just kind of, anybody can sell food. And if you die, then you don't buy from that person again type of thing.
There you go.
Of course, hard for you to buy anything if you're dead, but we're not get into that.
That does hurt sales.
And so we created, right, the United States Department of Agriculture, and the Food and Drug Administration to monitor these things and ensure some level of general consumer protection. And I think that we're at the point where if we're going to take things like that seriously, which I think we should, I think it's important that we have an active entity. And I know I don't like this because if listeners know, I'm usually in favor where we can of less, not more government. But I think that it's important that we have an active arm of the government that's regularly involved in monitoring this stuff, because if anything's become clear in the last few years, it's that our lawmakers in Washington are not the ones that we want to trust to try to keep up to speed.
I wondered when you were going to bring that up, because I know how frustrated you are that
it's scary.
Our national legislatures know so little about how technology actually works.
I think it's scary because it's frustrating. It makes you upset. But at the same time, it's like, how the hell are we to expect these people to look out for us?
To legislate a system that they know nothing about.
Exactly. And that's why I think we have to have an entity in place where you have experts who understand this stuff, who can make policy recommendations to Congress. Because without that, what do we wag our fingers at Congress and tell them they should get better about it? But there's a limit to how much how much is reasonable to ask your congressman to be an expert on. And you can't, that's why we have a Food and Drug Administration, because you can't expect them to know everything there is to know about food and law and everything else, military policy, all that. That's why they have all these people. So those are what I think are more practical long-term solutions to this and other privacy concerns.
Other than getting the flashy thingies from Men in Black.
Other than that, okay. which I that.
You wholeheartedly like that.
I like that.
Yeah. Okay.
If we can find Will Smith,
just so you're on the record that you like my idea, even
I do.
Though, yeah. Okay.
I like it. So Lance, we've challenged people to tune in, right? To bring others into the conversation. Because if you're listening, you've already tuned in.
And I have people contacting me on social media, telling me about almost every day,
really?
Of different people that they're telling us about.
Oh,
so,
people are contacting you on social media?
People are contacting me on social media, telling me of different individuals that they are encouraging to listen to our podcast.
Oh, but you don't have social media. That's what he wants you to think.
Maybe you need to Google me and see.
That's your homework, audience. Google Lance. See if you can find him.
Check out my Twitter account.
That's right.
You never know.
That's right.
Does he have one or does he not?
So if people want to bring others into the conversation, this is a syndicated radio program. It's a podcast. So there's a couple different ways you could tune in. But the podcast is out every Tuesday and Thursday. So how can people tune into that, Lance?
Well, you have my favorite app to use, and that is Spotify. You can also get us on Stitcher, Apple Podcast, or anywhere else fine podcasts are found.
For The State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.